Great. So thank you, Anna and Nathan, for the opportunity to be here. It's a great pleasure to present the Amplia story. I'll be around today, so if there's any subsequent questions, please feel free to come and ask. So just our typical disclaimer: we don't sell any product, but this is all experimental medicine. So. And our focus up till now has been in pancreatic cancer. I don't need to tell this audience about pancreatic cancer other than the numbers I've got up there. It's a terrible diagnosis for any patient to receive. It is the third most common cancer in terms of cancer death, expected to be the second most common cause of cancer death by 2030. So we're seeing, a significant challenge there in the treatment of pancreatic cancer. It is considered an orphan indication, so that's less than 200,000 patients in the US. So probably 70,000 patients will be diagnosed in the US this year with pancreatic cancer, around 5,000 in Australia, which doesn't sound a lot, but I can guarantee there's people in this room who've been affected by it through a loved one or know someone who has. So the next figure is probably the most compelling. 3% survival after 5 years if you're diagnosed with advanced pancreatic cancer, and most patients, when they're diagnosed with advanced pancreatic cancer, when they're diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, are diagnosed at the advanced stage. So this is where the disease has already progressed elsewhere into the body, typically the liver, the lung, lymph node, bone marrow. And that figure's probably on the high side, to be honest. Most patients at the best therapy at the moment will die from the disease within 12 months, normally around 8 to 9 months. If you don't take therapy, you'll probably succumb to the disease in less than 3 months. So it's a very aggressive disease. Patients clearly need better treatments. From a commercial perspective, you don't actually need to do a lot for it to be meaningful to patients, for it to be meaningful to the market. The market currently is just under 4 billion, expected to grow over the next decade. I expect that number to be even higher than that, to be honest, just given the changes that are happening in the space at the moment that I'll touch on a little bit later. There's one message to take home today, is that our drug, namafotinib, a drug discovered here in Australia, makes other drugs work better. And particularly in pancreatic cancer, I'll show you the data that underpins that statement. But the way our drug works, it makes other drugs work better. A bit like a pole makes you jump higher than actually just trying to jump using the Fosby flop. So I can make that statement based on data we've developed and generated over the last couple of years from a study we've called the ACCENT trial in pancreatic cancer. This is a study in newly diagnosed metastatic pancreatic cancer patients, where patients are getting their normal treatment that they would get, which is a chemotherapy regime called gemcitabine and Abraxane. So they get that on their normal schedule, but on top of that, they're taking our drug, namafotinib, as a pill. So they've got the convenience, we don't have to go into a hospital to get an injection, so they just take our drug as a pill in the days prior to receiving their chemotherapy infusions. We've run that trial in Australia and in South Korea. The question is, why Korea? Well, Korea's got a fantastic healthcare system, fantastic clinical trial capability, and unfortunately a slightly higher occurrence of pancreatic cancer. So we've run the trial in Australia and South Korea, and I'm going to show you some of that, the sort of headline data from that. It's a very weird colour, this screen, but anyhow. The sort of take-home message, I think, is that our drug leads to a better response than the chemotherapy alone, makes the chemotherapy work better. That's shown in this figure, complete response. So this is a complete response is where when patients are imaged every 2 months, that you cannot see any cancer present, and that is maintained for 2 months or more. So that's a complete response. We saw a complete response rate of 8%. So that's that might sound like a very large amount. The benchmark study for our own clinical study they saw one complete response rate in over 400, one complete response in over 400 patients. So we've seen 5 in 64 patients. So already you can see the response rate is significantly better just by adding our drug on top of chemotherapy than chemotherapy alone. Another measure is disease control rate. So not only complete response, a partial response where we see a significant reduction in tumour size, and even stable disease where you're stopping that aggressive disease from growing, we see a 70% disease control rate, considerably better than chemotherapy alone, which is 50%. Probably the key thing that patients are interested in, is this going to improve my survival? Well, the data we've got to date says it improves progression-free survival, so keeps the disease in check, and improves overall survival by at least 2 months better than chemotherapy alone. Now again, 2 months mightn't sound like a lot. It's a lot if you're looking down the barrel of being dead within a year. I would also state that the last drug to be approved in pancreatic cancer, it's a drug called Nalirifox. It was approved in the US, not available here in Australia. That was approved on an 11.1 month overall survival. So from a regulator's perspective, that kind of difference is meaningful. Meaningful for patients, meaningful for the regulator. Nalirifox, as I said, is not available here. It actually has quite significant toxicity, where our drug doesn't, and I'll show you that on this slide. And I don't expect you to read all the numbers in the table, but basically the middle row there, it should be blue, I don't know what colour you call that there. But basically when you're adding our drug on top of chemotherapy, and we compare that to what you see in chemotherapy alone, the sort of side effects I've marked down there, neutropenia, anemia, diarrhoea, peripheral neuropathy, all these severe side effects that you see with chemotherapy are no different when you add our drug on top of it. So our drug's not making the chemotherapy toxicity any worse. In fact, if you look at some of those comparison numbers, in some cases it makes it better. So we're ticking the boxes here. We're improving the durability of response of chemotherapy. We're improving the depth of response of chemotherapy, and the drug is safe and well tolerated by patients. So, in fact, some of the clinicians we speak to say that the drug really, from a safety perspective, is quite benign, that it's actually very well tolerated by patients. So how does the drug work? Well, it's really quite simple. Pancreatic cancer, like a lot of solid tumours, has a kind of scar tissue sitting around it, like a bird's nest, if you like, of fibres that actually block the immune system from being able to get in and attack those cancers, those abnormal cells. It actually blocks even chemotherapy. If you give chemotherapy, that it can't penetrate through that dense network of collagen fibres. Our drug actually breaks down that, doesn't destroy it, but it breaks it down, relaxes it so that the immune system can better penetrate, the drugs can better penetrate, and that's what I'm showing there, that when you take our drug, and we've got data from animal models showing this, we can actually see those fibres get smaller, we can see the cross-linking of those fibres decrease to allow better drug penetration into the tumour tissue. So that's the first thing. The second thing the drug does, it actually blocks processes within the cancer cells that the cancer cells co-opt to get around the effect of your chemotherapy. So we like to say it's a 1-2 punch. There's a punch on that area around the tumour microenvironment, and there's a punch on the cancer cells itself. And then you combine that with chemotherapy, you get this profound effect where the cells die, the tumour shrinks. So that's how the drug works. The obvious question, I guess, is, well, can it be deployed in other scenarios? And the answer is yes. A lot of solid tumours have this scar tissue, and this is not solely related to the addition of chemotherapy. So our drug can work in combination with other drugs and in other cancers. And so as we move forward, so I wanted to focus on 3 particular areas. So the first is further work in pancreatic cancer. So we're starting to plan now for a registration-enabling study, building on the promising data we've already seen in the ACCENT trial. But if you were to Google now new drugs for pancreatic cancer, you would be inundated with news about RAS inhibitors, RAS inhibitors, KRAS inhibitors. That's all the rage. Some of the biggest biotechs in the States currently are working in RAS inhibitors. One of them, probably the company at the forefront, a company called Revolution Medicines. Their market capitalisation is about 30 billion, with a B, 30 billion US dollars. So they've got a drug that's a RAS inhibitor, very exciting data in second-line pancreatic cancer. The thing is, that drug still needs to penetrate in through that scar tissue and get into the tumour. So there's an opportunity there for combination with our FAK inhibitor. In addition, like any virus that you might get, a cold virus, cancers can work their way around targeted therapies like RAS inhibitors. And our FAK inhibitor blocks a lot of those resistance pathways. We've shown that in mouse models. And in fact, there's even data now in the clinic with another FAK inhibitor in a rare form of ovarian cancer showing that the combination of targeting the RAS pathway and FAK actually gives you a much better outcome. So there's now clinical validation of that. Ovarian cancer is another cancer that's highly fibrotic, a clear involvement of the signalling pathways that our drug blocks. We've just announced last week a collaboration with the Australian experts in ovarian cancer called ANZCOG. We're just about to start a clinical trial. We'll be recruiting patients by mid-year. This is a trial in first-line patients that don't respond to the existing chemotherapy. So that's a really exciting trial being run in collaboration with the experts in Australia. And then there's opportunities. Really, the big one is lung cancer. It's a market that we've not gone into just because there's a lot of competition. It's obviously still a terrible disease, one of the biggest cancer killers. And KRAS inhibitors are used in that, as are immune checkpoint inhibitors. And again, we've got very clear data showing that our drug can work in combination with those drugs. So I'm just about finished. So what are we doing now? As I mentioned, in 2026, we've got the ovarian cancer trial that will be starting shortly. We will be looking to start a new clinical trial. We're working and speaking with a number of companies developing RAS inhibitors to actually go into a clinical study in combination with RAS inhibitors, maybe pancreatic, maybe lung. So we're very focused on that, and I hope to be able to announce something in the not too distant future. We are looking at a regional licensing deal in the Asia Pacific region to help progress the molecule, but also obviously bring in some upfront funding. And then in the background, we're doing all the registrational and regulatory work to build up to this registrational study in pancreatic cancer that will start midway through next year. So with that, I'll leave it, but thank you very much for your attention. Happy to take questions.
Are you seeing roadblocks in the development of your, not just the science and your testing and trials, but the business growth? Are there roadblocks there that you see you can overcome, or that the pathway is opening up, and that sort of progress? Like when you're lying there at night thinking about this company and skipping up at night, what are those sort of things?
Yeah, look, running a phase 3 study in pancreatic cancer is not going to be cheap. So we're spending a lot of effort trying to identify the best path forward and the most efficient way to get to owning the critical data. How can we get an early look at the data that might allow us to then partner the molecule out to a larger company? So there's a number of pathways we've got to go through there. But you know, we will be at some point needing to raise additional money to do a phase 3 study. So how much that is, you know, is part of this planning process we're going through and engaging with the regulators. So I'll have to answer that question more specifically later on.
At phase 3 completion, does that really put you on the world stage for this really aggressive, well-known, feared cancer?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Already our data, the fact that, you know, we've seen these 5 complete responses in a smaller cohort of patients is getting a lot of people interested in what we're doing. There's 2 other competitors of ours who have drugs that work in the same way. Neither of them are working in pancreatic cancer. but one of those has their drugs approved in a rare form of ovarian cancer. So the target's validated from a clinical perspective, but also from the regulator. So now that we're getting exciting data in pancreas, that's making people sit up and take notice of it all.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.